Who did it is the question, and the answer depends on whom you're asking. This fight has many players, but we'll go with two broad groups. On one side is Syria, the president, Bashar al-Assad, backed by Russia and Iran. On the other side are anti-Assad rebels, backed by the US, France, Israel and their NATO allies. The US-led group blames Assad for the chemical weapon attack. The Assad-led group blames the US and Israel for the pre-dawn strike on the airbase in Homs. This is how it played out. At first, the Syrian state media accused American-led coalition forces of bombing the T4 military airbase in Homs. Why was the US the obvious culprit? Because just a few hours before this strike, US President Donald Trump had publicly warned Assad. There will be a big price to pay, he had said. Now, of course, Washington denies any role in the airbase attack. The Pentagon has issued a statement, and I'm quoting, "At this time, the Department of Defense is not conducting any airstrikes in Syria. However, we continue to closely watch the situation and support the ongoing diplomatic efforts to hold those who use chemical weapons in Syria and otherwise accountable." That is the American version. Next come the French. Their president, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, is among the most vocal critics of President Assad. 2 months back, remember, Macron had vowed to strike if there was another chemical attack in Syria. But now the French say they didn't do it. That is, they did not strike the airbase in Homs. Hours later, Syria and its ally Russia blamed Israel. This time they offered what they said was proof. The Russian military has said that 2 Israeli F-15 warplanes were involved in this strike. Reports suggested that Israeli warplanes had carried out these strikes from Lebanese airspace. Israel, interestingly, has neither accepted nor rejected this charge. But Israel has been talking about this airbase in question, the T4 airbase. Israel says that this airbase is used by Iran, its sworn enemy, and that's something that Israelis will not put up with. That doesn't leave us any wiser about possible Israeli involvement. But if you were to believe experts, the attackers were indeed from Israel. Evidence, they say, points to several attacks in the past. Israel has been targeting Syrian army locations. Israeli forces have hit convoys and bases of Iranian-backed militias that fight alongside President Assad's forces. In February this year, Israel accused Iranian forces of having sent a drone into their territory. Israel retaliated by sending an F-16 warplane. The Syrian army shot it down. Israel struck back with large-scale raids on Syrian air defense systems and Iranian targets. The Homs attack may be the latest in that series. The grandstanding, the blame game continues, but the stories from Syria are heartbreaking. An old and lethal ghost has resurfaced. Chemical weapons, they're being used again, and there are heart-rending pictures of children falling prey to them. But what are chemical weapons and which side in Syria is using them? Chemical weapons, as the name suggests, contain chemicals strong enough to cause death, injury, temporary incapacitation and sensory irritation to human and other living beings. Chemical weapons like biological, nuclear and radiological weapons are classified as WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. And chemical weapons can be in gaseous, liquid or solid form. There are different kinds of chemical weapons. The most common ones are nerve gas, tear gas and pepper spray. Then there are the dangerous unitary chemical agents. These are effective on their own. They do not have to be mixed with other chemicals. Some of the more notorious ones are nerve agents and vesicants. So are there any global agreements aimed at preventing the use of these lethal weapons? Yes, there are many. The latest is the Chemical Weapons Convention, known as the CWC. 192 countries have signed it. India is among them. This agreement bans the production, storage and use of chemical weapons. But are all the signatories following this convention is the question. Evidently not. Chemical weapons are killing indiscriminately in Syria all over again. So we come back to the question we started with. Who has them and who's using them? First, let's tell you who has signed the convention against their use. You'll be surprised to know that all the players in the Syrian war have signed it. Iraq, the United States, Syria, Iran, they've all signed the CWC, and yet one or more of them must have flouted it for such horror to unfold. President Bashar al-Assad of Syria has been and continues to be regarded the main perpetrator, but he's backed by Tehran's Revolutionary Guard, as well as various Iran-backed Shiite militia. Other possible culprits include the anti-Assad Free Syrian Army, the Kurdish forces, the YPG they're called, the Syrian National Opposition and the Islamic State. They've not signed anything, they're not bound by anything. But what about Russia? Russia did announce the destruction of the last of its chemical weapons in late 2017. So far, it has not been named as behind any of the many chemical strikes in Syria. But Russia, remember, backs the Iran-Assad alliance in this bloody mess. So we ask, must not Russia share part, if not all, the blame for this devastation? In August 2013, chemical weapons were allegedly used by Syrian troops in Damascus. A few days later, the United Nations confirmed that sarin gas was used in this attack. More than 1,500 Syrian rebels were killed. In September 2014, chlorine-filled barrel bombs were dropped on Idlib, Khamenas, Talmenis and Sarmin. A UN report said that Syria had used chlorine bombs, quote-unquote, systematically and repeatedly in rebel-controlled towns. 1 year later, rebels and activists claimed that chemical weapons were used in an attack at Maria in Aleppo. It was later found that the so-called Islamic State was responsible for this mustard gas attack. Come to 2016, the use of chemical weapons has increased. 24 cases of suffocation were reported in Sarakeb. It is a rebel-held town. It was rather a rebel-held town near Aleppo. Some of those attacks were carried out by the ISIS, but at least 3 chemical attacks can be attributed to the Assad government. Last year, remember, in April, warplanes flew over the rebel-held town of Khan Sheikhoun in the Idlib province. The chemical weapons watchdog confirmed that sarin gas was once again used in this attack. It killed 83 people, mainly women and children. This cycle of violence has been going on for 7 years now. It shows no signs of abating. It's a cruel conflict. Neither side has any regard for the civilian casualties. It involves numerous stakeholders, dozens of seemingly contradictory alliances, rapidly changing dynamics. WION's Daniele Pagani breaks it down for you. For the moment, we'll talk about what's being called the Spring of Pashtun Awakening in Pakistan. A series of protests by the marginalized community residing in Pakistan's northwest has taken the country and indeed the world by surprise. What are their demands? What is this ethnic minority protesting against? Our next report explains.
On Friday, Pakistani Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi visited Afghanistan to hold face-to-face talks with the leader of the neighbouring state. The aim was to reduce the growing mistrust between the two nations. Only 2 days later, the streets of Peshawar in Pakistan witnessed the seamy sides of this relationship. Thousands of Pashtuns who form a majority in Afghanistan but see themselves as a sidelined minority in Pakistan raised slogans against the Pakistani government, their clarion call being this: "Whose blood is this?" A voice from the rally screamed. The crowd answered in unison, "Pashtun blood." They were protesting the Pakistani army's excesses on the pretext of fighting terror in the name of a war against Taliban.
We are here because we want our rights. We have no demands. We do not fight to get power, but rather to get justice for the cruel things they have done to us.
Years of simmering discontent has snowballed into an organized protest movement. The trigger, the last straw, was the killing of this man, Naqibullah Mahsood, a shopkeeper turned model from the Pashtun community. Mahsood was shot dead in what is being called an extrajudicial killing. Mahsood soon became a rallying point. He was the face of all the young Pashtuns who had gone missing over the years in the war-torn region.
My brother is missing. We are not aware of the crime he committed or why he was arrested. Someone should at least tell us about his crime and about his whereabouts. We are not even aware if he is alive or not.
Pakistan's second largest ethnic minority has found its political voice, and this man has been instrumental in mobilizing the Pashtuns. Young leader Manzoor Pashtun is leading a mass movement. He champions the cause of his people, demands justice after years of oppression.
We are against all cruelty, whether it's from good or bad Talibans, from the peace committee or from ISI, MI or from the army.
The accusations aren't new, but the bold voice in which they are being flung at the government. Successive dispensations in Pakistan have crushed dissent from Pashtuns and rubbished their claims of persecution. It may not be easy to dismiss them this time. With a federal election due soon and this protest gaining international attention, Islamabad and Rawalpindi may be forced to answer for the past. Bureau Report, WION.
So who are the Pashtuns? They are the second largest ethnic minority in Pakistan, residing predominantly in the federally administered tribal areas of FATA, as it's called, bordering Afghanistan. The Pashtuns comprise almost 15% of the population of Pakistan, their numbers being pegged at approximately 30 million. What are they complaining about? Their grievance dates back to the time of Pakistani independence. The region continues to be ruled by British-era laws. The country's courts and parliament, meaning Pakistani courts and parliament, have no jurisdiction of the federally administered tribal areas of FATA where the Pashtuns live. They are instead ruled by a political agent appointed by the central government. So if the sense of political alienation was not enough, the people of this region were then caught in the folds of a war. It began in 2001. There was an international crackdown against the Taliban after the 9/11 attack in the US. This war, this crackdown, claimed a heavy toll on the Pashtuns living in Taliban-held areas. For no fault of theirs, they were being killed. They were at the receiving end of both militant strikes as well as the army's operations. Their homes were razed, their establishments pounded with airstrikes. Thousands were killed in the crossfire, and those who survived were frequently targeted by the Pakistani army. Young men from the Pashtun community were abducted on suspicion of being linked with terror outfits. Like any other war-torn region, economic growth eluded the northwestern frontier province of Pakistan. Tough living conditions forced the Pashtuns to depend on grazing and cattle herding for income. With schools, colleges and businesses razed to the ground, the Pashtuns were deprived of economic opportunities in the country of Pakistan. Following indiscriminate human rights violations, millions of Pashtuns had been forced to flee the region in search of better opportunities. Multiple operations by the Pakistani army to quote-unquote purge the region of militancy forced tens of thousands of impoverished Pashtuns out of their homes. The latest such operation was called the Zarb-e-Azb. It was launched in 2014 on the directions of then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. And once again, the Pashtuns were at the receiving end. But wherever they went, persecution followed the Pashtun community. Take 27-year-old Naqib Mahsood, the shopkeeper who fled to Karachi as a kid. He became a social media sensation. His soaring popularity was brought to an unfortunate halt when he was killed in an alleged encounter earlier this year. Officials claim that he was linked with militant groups, but his family has rubbished all such allegations. So following years of neglect, the Pashtuns have now united under an umbrella movement. It is called the Pashtun Tehfuz movement in Pakistan. One that has managed to bring the grievances of the oppressed community to the attention of the Pakistani lawmakers. They carried out a protest march in Islamabad a few weeks back. You can see those images on your screens. This trended on social media under the hashtag Pashtun Long March, and then the one that we saw yesterday. The cause of these Pashtuns has found resonance across Pakistan, from social activists to activists like Malala Yousafzai to political leaders like Bilawal Bhutto. Many have backed the Pashtun cause. But some view support from political camps as mere opportunism. Remember, Pakistan is gearing up for an election, a federal election in June this year. And it seems that political parties are rushing to please the Pashtun community. The government has moved a resolution now to merge the FATA region with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. This is in a bid to bring the Pashtuns into the political mainstream. Where does India fit in this equation? The Indian government has been making an aggressive push to boost defense exports. In an unprecedented move, the government has asked its defense attaches to come to India for specialized briefings. The message is very simple: drum up interest for India's defense equipment once you head back to your missions abroad. Additionally, India's Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that the country is ready to export indigenously developed missiles to friendly nations. Listen in.
Particularly on our missiles, there's definitely a lot of interest. And on that, a lot of discussion is also going on. As with many things with the government, not just one, the other end is also a government which wants to buy. Decision making sometimes is frustratingly long drawn. But the interest is sustained. Sometimes it's a question of the cost being negotiated. But missile interests interest on Indian missile is definitely growing.
Sitharaman is personally spearheading the initiative to involve the defence attaches and promote the Make in India initiative in the defence sector. Government officers and industry leaders are briefing as many as 44 of these officials who are currently in India. But the Indian defence industry still has a long way to go. With local manufacturing still under-equipped to meet the Indian military's needs, the country continues to be the largest importer of arms. Also, there's little investment in research and development in India. But the Indian Army remains optimistic about the future.
We are rapidly indigenizing. The DRDO is doing a phenomenal job. There are some private industries also who are committing in research and development they are doing. But that said, yes, we have a long way to go. That's why solutions like, Make in India in collaboration, joint ventures and so on. That's why solutions like Make One, Make Two and so on.
So what is India's game plan, you would ask? The government of India is planning to start the export of the BrahMos missile to start with. The BrahMos was developed through a joint venture between India and Russia. Reports say discussions are underway with a number of countries. The list includes Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Indonesia and Vietnam. Not only could this boost defence exports in India, it could also have a strategic implication. Take the case of Vietnam, which is currently locked in a dispute with China over the South China Sea. If indeed Vietnam is considering buying the BrahMos and the deal goes through, India will arm a country right at China's doorstep for the very first time, and that is going to be huge. Buying the BrahMos makes sense for Vietnam as well. The missile can be launched from land, sea and air. It can target bunkers and radar systems, making it one of the most cost-effective cruise missile systems in the world. And India says this will just be the beginning. It's interesting to note that Rajnikant wants IPL matches to be shifted out of Tamil Nadu. He's called the IPL matches to be a form of festivity. He says it would be insensitive and embarrassment if IPL matches were held at a time when farmers across the state of Tamil Nadu are reeling under an acute water shortage, when there is agrarian distress in his state. All very well. But Rajnikant has said very little about other forms of entertainment in Tamil Nadu, for instance, movies. He's not said anything about movies not being screened or made in solidarity with the farmer protest. The man himself, Rajnikant, is shooting for a film titled 2.0. According to estimates, the budget for this film is 450 crore rupees, that's $69 million. That makes it the most expensive film ever made in India. He doesn't feel this is a form of festivity or a wasteful expenditure. Besides 2.0, Rajnikant is also shooting for another film. It's called Kala, also slated for release later this year. The budget for this movie is estimated to be 180 crore rupees. That's $27.7 million. He doesn't think it's wasteful. It's interesting to note that Rajnikant feels no qualms in carrying on with such high-profile films, such expensive movies involving hundreds of crores of rupees. The sequel to the movie Kabali, which minted more than 500 crores or $77 million, is also in the making, although no information is available on the budget. All of this is for entertainment, we assume. And all of this is being produced at the very time when Tamil Nadu is reeling under a chronic shortage of water, and yet Rajnikant wants only the IPL matches to be shunted out of Tamil Nadu while filming and production work of his forthcoming films continue.